Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu. Cyprus Islamic Association, Cypriot Muslims, and Jazeera Association. And I have 5 respected guests this evening. Mustafa Qureshi, head of Jazeera Association, Ertan Karpazlı, co-founder and journalist also, and co-founder, of course, of Jazeera Association, Ahmet Barut, co-founder of Muslim Cypriots, Ali Mullah, British-born Turkish Cypriot, teacher in South London, and Ahmed Yusuf Sistirli, co-founder of Cyprus Islamic Association. Thank you for being on my show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Hope you're all well and hope Ramadan is going well.
Yeah, really good, thank you. And same for you.
Thank you.
You too.
So the first question is that the program tonight has been requested by our viewers last week, is to go over the basic principles of faith in Islam, and what better but then to go over the 5 pillars of Islam. So we'll be discussing the 5 principal pillars of Islam this evening, and also we'll have a question and answer session. The first pillar of Islam being the Shahada, and we'll ask this question to Mustafa Qureshi, the head of Jazeera Association. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Hussein Hoja. First of all, salam alaikum to all our viewers. That means peace be upon you. Thanks for having me, Hussein Hoja. First of all, salam alaikum to all our viewers. That means peace be upon you. Okay, so the Shahada, which is an Arabic word, we say Shahadet in Turkish, comes from the same root as Shahid. We also say this in Turkish, and it means to witness. And quite simply, it's Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah, which roughly translates in English as I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And Allah is just an Arabic word meaning God, and we know it to be the most perfect and the most appreciated title for God, but he has many other names as well. In Turkish, we can translate this to ben tanıklık ederim ki Allah'tan başka ilah yoktur ve yine tanıklık ederim ki Muhammed onun kulu ve elçisidir. So we mentioned that the Shahada comes from the root word of shahid, to witness. But what are we witnessing? It's not like we can just look out the window and we see God there. Well, in the Quran it says, verily in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, there are indeed signs for men of understanding. And there are many verses in the Quran, our holy book, which discusses and encourages one to think and ponder. We are not a faith of blind faith. So by looking around and looking at nature and ourselves, we can see evidence for God Almighty. Or it's like, we could say, for an example, that it's like an artist and you're looking at a painting and it's a splendid painting, and you're like, well, buckets of paint didn't just fall and create this masterpiece. There must have been some greater genius who created this piece of artwork. And as such, we can look at nature and ourselves, and we can see a most splendid design, which requires the most splendid designer. The Shahada is actually very common in our cultures as well. You can see it in people's homes. Many Muslims' flags have the Shahada in it. The Topkapı Palace, the Ottoman Palace in Istanbul, has the Shahada as well. You may also see many celebrities who will come out with their finger like this. I think the most recent popular figure is Khabib Nurmagomedov, the UFC fighter. He always comes up with his finger. And this is symbolizing the Shahada. And often people have also referenced Cyprus to looking like a Shahadat Barmal, or the Shahadat, the witnessing finger. And I think that's quite an interesting side fact there as well. So yeah, that's essentially what it is. The Shahada, I'll just finish off with, which will nicely lead on to topics which the other brothers will discuss as well. The Shahada is known as Mihtatul Jannah, the key to paradise. And so believing sincerely that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the final messenger of Allah, essentially makes you a Muslim and will lead you to paradise. So no Muslim is perfect, but it's that belief, and through that belief, it will come out and manifest itself in actions. So there's a saying in which they say that the Shahada is like a key, and the teeth of the key are the actions which are required to attain yourself to please Allah, essentially. And we try, and we may fail at times, but the whole point is that we try. And the more sincere we are, and the higher that our belief, our iman is in the Shahada, then inshallah that will manifest itself in the following, which the brothers will explain. Thank you. That's it.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for making that very clear for everyone to understand as well. And while we're on, so we have a few viewers and people saying, Hoş geldiniz, Assalamu alaikum, and good evening, and people waving and coming on. So, yes, the next pillar of faith, as we know, is salah, which is worship, and is also translated, or in Turkish, it's known as namaz or ibadet. And we've got Yusuf Ahmet Sistili to explain to us what is salah, and because most Turkish people won't know what the word salah means unless they're practicing. So can you go over and explain to us what salah and what the pillar stands for, please? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show. So yes, I'm going to talk about salah. I'm not talking about an Egyptian football player, because that's the first thing that comes up when you type it into Google. I'm talking about salah in terms of the actual meaning of the word. And it's commonly mistranslated, actually. So we commonly translate salah or namaz. Namaz is predominantly used by non-Arabic speaking people, such as the Persians, Turkish people, people from Azerbaijan, etc., Uzbekistan, and even Kurdish, Hindi, and Bengali. But we often translate this word to mean prayer, and we talk about the 5 daily prayers. And sometimes I get people coming over to me saying to me, why is it that Muslims only pray 5 times a day? And the reason that they think that is because it's a mistranslation. The word for prayer in Arabic or supplication is dua. And you can do as many prayers as many times as you want, in any direction, in any language. You can do it, you can vocalize it, you can pray inside. And you can do it facing any direction at any time of the day. You can do it out loud as a group. You could do it individually. Prayer is dua. So what's salah? Salah is a specific form of worship. It actually means, etymologically speaking, to connect, to communicate, to contact. In fact, the way you can almost think about it is through telecommunications. It's a way of connecting with something else. In this case, God, Allah. And so salah is mentioned in the Quran. It's mentioned at least 82 different times. It's, I guess salah, there's different forms of salah, and there's different forms of different ways in which we're connected to God. So we're connected to God, we try to be connected to God all the time. So, and the reason that we practice salah is to attain a connection with God and to purify our hearts. Tazkiyah and nafs, to cleanse and purify our souls. In order to pray salah, which is a specific type of worship, as I mentioned, there's almost 3 ways to look at it. There's the physical, there's the mental, and then there's the spiritual. And there's 3 aspects to it. So physically, it involves actually bowing down before your creator. There's a physical motion, there's a physical movement that is involved, and there are physical benefits to that. There's scientists today that tell us that, you know, we should be doing certain exercises and moving our bodies in a certain way to make sure that blood flows and that we're keeping ourselves healthy. There are physical benefits of doing salah. In addition to the physical aspects of it, there is also a mental aspect, and that is that we should be thinking and that we should be contemplating about God, and we should be thinking about what we're praying for during the salah. And then there's also the spiritual element, and that is spiritually connecting to the higher being, to God. So it's a specific type of worship, and Muslims should try to pray 5 times a day as a minimum. I use the word pray there. This is how common this mistranslation is. We should be practicing salah at least 5 times a day. And we all try to do that in the same direction, and that is a representation of the unification of Muslims around the world, that we're all praying at a similar time, at the same time, and we're all praying in the same direction. In terms of the times of the salah, there are different opinions sometimes around certain times of when the prayer should be, but ultimately there are 5 prayers, and usually the prayer will end when the next prayer is meant to come in, with the exception of the morning prayer, which in Arabic is referred to as Fajr, but also referred to as the Sabah prayer, or Sabah, and in Turkish Sabah namazı, and that ends not when the next prayer comes in, but it ends sooner than that. So essentially, that is the second pillar of Islam, and by upholding that pillar, if we're observing it with those 3 aspects in mind, those 3 dimensions in mind, physical, mental, and spiritual, then one should be able to purify their hearts and gain a closer connection to God. That is the ultimate objective of it. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Just a very quick question on the salah. So the salah is done at 5 different times, of course, as you explained. And what's the most important part of the salah? Can you? Is there a very important part of the salah? So I know it's like standing and going into ruku, and then you have the prostration. What would you say is the most important part of the salah?
So physically, the physical aspect, that the most important physical aspect, is where your head is literally on the ground, prostrating before your Lord. But then again, if you don't have the spiritual aspect or the mental aspect involved, then your prayer is not really your salah, isn't valid. In fact, there's a saying which is attributed to Muhammad, upon whom be peace, where there were people all praying their salah in a line, and he said this person's got a certain fraction of the reward, this person's got another fraction of the reward, and outwardly it looked like they were all praying the same, because it's not just physical gymnastics 5 times a day, it's your heart. And the most important aspect outside of the physical aspect is that you're praying with your heart. Metaphorically speaking, you're praying with your heart, and you're connecting with your Lord, and that you mean what you say, and that you understand what you say, and you're praying it with sincerity and with pure intentions. If you don't have that, then the salah isn't going to be successful, and you could just be doing physical gymnastics.
That's beautifully put. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ahmed Yusuf. And next we discuss zakat. And there's a lot of confusion about zakat, and I'm glad Ahmed Baruk's going to be answering this question. Yes, so what is the 3rd pillar, and what is zakat?
So zakat, which is also pronounced as zakat in Turkish, it relates to the charity, and there are 3 types of charity given in Islam, and I think it's important to go over them. So there's 3 charities in Islam. So there's 2 of them are obligatory, and 1 of them is voluntary. The 2 obligatory ones include, number 1, the zakat, which is one of the pillars of Islam, and it is compulsory for every Muslim to pay annually, those who can afford it. And I'll go into that in more detail in a little bit. The second obligatory charity in Islam is zakat al-fitr, which is it's different and separate from the zakat, and this is due to it's linked to Ramadan, and it's due at the end of Ramadan as well. Now the voluntary one is called sadaqah, and some people might have come across this in Turkish as well. And this is a voluntary charity that you could donate any time of the year and however much you want as well. Moving on to talking about zakat in more detail, in the Quran, Allah on multiple occasions actually links the prayer with charity, and Allah describes the believers as those. The believers are those who establish their prayer and give zakat. So, like I said before, the zakat is given annually. However, the calendar we use for it is the Islamic calendar, which is also referred to the Hijri calendar, and it's based on lunar cycles. So when we give our zakat, we got to base it on the Islamic calendar and not the Western or Christian calendar. And also in terms of when you pay the zakat, it can be any sort of specific day chosen in the Islamic year. So, for example, it can be a specific day chosen in Ramadan, for example. For example, it could be the 20th of Ramadan or any other day in Ramadan. And that day that you choose, let's say the 20th of Ramadan, that's when you start to calculate your zakat, and then you pay it shortly after that. You can also pay zakat before that chosen date as well, but you have to have the intention to that you are paying zakat, so it can contribute to that specific year of zakat payment. So you don't have to specifically pay your zakat in Ramadan, like I said, but it makes sense to do so because not only is it more rewarding to pay it in Ramadan, but also it's more practical because we're in that spirit of giving more in Ramadan. So who pays zakat exactly? So the people who pay zakat is every Muslim who can afford it. So that means who has wealth which is above a specific amount, and that specific amount is referred to as nisab. So you can say your extra wealth, if you like, which is above the nisab threshold. So that can include that your extra wealth can include like cash as well as gold and silver. And if you want to calculate your zakat as well, you can. There's online calculators, so you can from reputable Islamic charities, and the percentage that you pay from your wealth is a simple 2.5%, which is given then as charity. And to add to that as well, I mean, Allah has given us many blessings, and zakat is one of them, because not only is it there to help tackle poverty, but it also helps humble you and helps you develop sympathy and for those who are less fortunate than yourself. And at the same time, it makes you grateful for what you have. When you are grateful, Allah says, as He teaches us, He says He will increase us in blessings if we are grateful. So alhamdulillah, Allah shakur. And that's a brief explanation of zakat.
That's very beautifully put. But can I ask, because someone asked a question, and there is this confusion in the Turkish Cypriot community because we have similar words that sound the same. So I'm sure you can answer this for us. So can you just explain what sadaqah is? So we use the word sadaqah.
Yeah.
But it's not zakat, but it's sadaqah.
Yeah. So zakat, like we said before, the zakat is a compulsory charity that we have to give as one of the pillars of Islam annually, whereas sadaqah is actually a voluntary charity that you can give whenever you want throughout the year, and also you can give as much as you want as well. So that's the difference.
And also, can you just give some information what the fitra is, because fitra is very important in Ramadan, and just before Bayram it has to be given. Can you just very, very quickly give us an explanation of fitra for our viewers?
Yeah, so the fitra, which is also referred to zakat al-fitr, it's a charity taken for the poor a few days before the end of fasting in Ramadan, and the amount varies really. So your local mosque usually can take your zakat al-fitr as well. It's usually about £5 to £10, and that's for if I'm correct, every member of your family. So let's say you got 4 members of your family. If it's about £5 per person, you will have to pay about £20 for the zakat al-fitr, so the fitra. Does anybody want to add to that? Or
I like to that.
Yeah.
That's fine. No, I'm just saying that most Turkish Cypriot or Turkish mosques in the UK have calculated the fitra as £10 per person, and correctly said, Ahmed, thank you for your valuable information. So if you have, for example, 4 people in one household, a mother and father and 2 children, so your fitra for your family household will be given as £40. So it's £10 a person. This must be given before the prayer has been read, before the salah, before the Eid namaz on Bayram Day, and it should be given to orphans or widows, people that need it. There's lots of stuff, and next week we'll go over what kind of charities we can give. Also, brothers and sisters, it's very important to remember that fitra is not only given for those who are fasting. Every Muslim has to give fitra if you can afford it. So even if you're fasting or you're not fasting, if you're practicing, but you consider yourself as a Muslim, you believe in one God and you accept the Prophet Muhammad, and you say that you're a Muslim, you should please try to give fitra, because it's a very important act of worship at the end of Ramadan. And we go now on to our very important 4th question, the fasting of Ramadan as the pillar of Islam, with our very respected journalist brother Ertan Karpazlı.
Oh yeah, I'm just going to get straight to the point. What is fasting? Now, there are different types of fasting according to different religions. Islam is not the only religion that has fasting. So some religions will have fasting where you abstain from one particular type of food, such as dairy products. And other religions will have fasting such as you abstain from speech. It's not always food and drink. Now, in Islam, what fasting is for us is abstaining from food, from drink, basically anything that passes the throat. So that includes smoking as well, and abstaining from sexual relations with your spouse. And there are 2 types of fasting in Islam. There's one which is a compulsory fast, which is performed in the lunar month of Ramadan, the month that we're in now. And then there's the non-compulsory, the voluntary fast, which you can perform outside of Ramadan as an extra bit of worship that you would like to partake in. Now, when we look at the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he did so much voluntary fasting, and he did it in a certain routine. So he typically fasted every Monday and Thursday of every week, and he also fasted the middle 3 months, the middle 3 days of each month, each lunar month. He fasted the first 10 days of the month of Dhul Hijjah, and he also fasted on days like Ashura. So if you take all of that, plus the compulsory fasting in the month of Ramadan, he pretty much fasted around half of his life. But these are all voluntary fasts. The month of Ramadan, if you're going to keep it to a bare minimum, the 29 or 30 days of Ramadan are the days that every single Muslim should be fasting as part of the 5 pillars of our faith. But who has to fast? Not every single Muslim has to fast. You have to be healthy. You have to be physically healthy. If fasting is going to damage your health, if your doctor is advising you not to fast, then you shouldn't fast. In fact, it can become haram, gunah, forbidden for you to fast if it's going to be detrimental for your health. Also, those who are traveling should not fast. Now, back in the day, they used to take days to travel from one city to another. Nowadays, we have planes. But still, even if you are partaking in a journey which is considered, even by modern standards, to be a journey, beyond your city, then you should not be fasting. Also, if young children who don't have the concept of fasting, and children who don't have the physical strength to fast as well, they should not be fasting. It only becomes obligatory once they pass a certain age, they hit puberty and they get to the age of maturity. That being said, if for whatever reason you cannot fast in Ramadan, for example, because of illness, you can make up for it outside of Ramadan as well. You can fast on days outside the Ramadan, provided that you do it before the next Ramadan comes. But that's only if you have a legitimate excuse. Another type of person who doesn't need to fast, for example, is a menstruating woman. This is something that a woman can do. She does have this option to make up the fast after Ramadan. How do you fast? Now, a mistake I see many of our Turkish Cypriot brothers and sisters doing, unfortunately, is that they are under the misconception that you are fasting from sunrise to sunset. That's not the case. You are actually supposed to fast from the onset of dawn until sunset. So before sunrise, we're talking about 1 or 2 hours before sunrise, basically when the first light, when the night sky starts lighting up, that's when the onset of dawn starts. And that's when you're supposed to begin your fast. And as well as abstaining from food, drink, and sexual relations, you're also supposed to abstain from other things that you are typically expected to abstain from, even outside of Ramadan, such as swearing, idle talk, stuff like that. And so it's just a month where we can, kind of refresh our faith. Now, why do we fast? This is a question that many Muslims are asked by non-Muslims. There are many reasons why we fast, but simply put, we have one intention of fasting, and that is to seek the pleasure of Allah, who has commanded us to fast in the month of Ramadan in the Quran. We believe in Allah, we believe the Quran is the word of Allah, and we show our belief, we demonstrate our belief by following the commands of Allah, which we find in the Quran. And we don't really need any more explanation beyond this. But the intention, this has to be our sole intention, because if you're fasting because you want to lose weight, I'm sorry, but your fasting is going to waste, because you don't have the right intention. So make sure you have the right intention. And just to round it up, why the month of Ramadan? Now, the month of Ramadan wasn't invented by Islam. The month of Ramadan has been around as a lunar month before Islam, before the Prophet Muhammad and Allah revealed the Quran to us. But the month of Ramadan for Muslims is very important, because the Quran was actually revealed on the 27th night of Ramadan. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also used to tell us that the Archangel Gabriel would come and visit him every Ramadan, and over that month they would revise and go over the Quran together. And why Allah chose the month of Ramadan, He knows best, and we're not to speculate on that. And lastly, some of the benefits of Ramadan, in addition to losing weight, it teaches you discipline. It reminds you who's boss. It reminds you that you are a creation and you are accountable to the Creator. And by abstaining from things that are normally permissible for you, such as food and drink, by abstaining from these things, it helps train you to abstain from things that are not permissible for you outside the Ramadan as well. It's also a renewal of faith. We are people, we are human beings, and the word we use in Turkish and originally in Arabic is insan. Insan comes from a root word which means something that forgets, someone who forgets, being forgetful. And naturally, as human beings, if we're left to our own devices, we often forget about Allah, we forget about our responsibilities to Allah. So Ramadan comes once a year to kind of remind us and help us renew our faith. And it's an opportunity for us to seek and get the forgiveness of Allah. Allah is always forgiving. So long as we ask Allah to forgive us, whether it's in Ramadan or not, Allah is always willing to forgive us. But this month particularly is a month where the doors of mercy are opened, the doors of punishment are closed. and it's a chance for us to get extra reward and draw closer to Allah as well, and to do good deeds. That being said, I think my 5 minutes are up. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Beautifully put, Ertan. Thank you for that. Enlightened a lot of us. There's lots of questions actually on your what you just said. We'll tackle those after. So the next pillar of faith, as we all know, the last one is the Hajj. And our dearest teacher and brother Alimullah, can you explain to our audience and our viewers what is the Hajj?
First of all, salam. Thank you very much for saying Ajah.
Salam.
So the Hajj, as you said, was the final pillar of Islam. I just want to touch on that by saying, first of all, that you know Allah refers to Himself as Al-Ghafur and Al-Rahim, so the most forgiving, the most merciful. And it's important that we mention that, because every other pillar of Islam, so for example, if we look at salah, zakat, and we look at fasting, they're all ways that we can attain Allah's forgiveness. So, in the same way that they are, the Hajj does that in one of the most amazing ways. So when we fast or give in charity, we could be rewarded based on a particular degree. So I think Yusuf mentioned this earlier when he said that when you fast, so when you pray, you might be rewarded to a certain amount, and maybe the same with charity. But with Hajj, it's slightly different because there's no degree in that. It's just you achieve paradise basically through your Hajj, for your pilgrimage. So when the Prophet Abraham built the Kaaba with his son, Allah ordered him to climb the top of the Kaaba and call people to come to it and then perform the pilgrimage. But it was a barren space. There wasn't much in the area at the time. So, he asked, he said, who will hear? And so he replied, it's your job to call them. It's my job to see who will respond. And, 4,000 years later, the Hajj is still being performed. Before Islam, was sort of declared as a religion, before the Quran, before the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam was, become a prophet, people were performing Hajj. So, Christians and Jews and pagans would perform Hajj to the Kaaba in Mecca. So it's an amazing thing to see every year when we see the pictures of people, walking in such a huge crowd. The Hajj is one of the biggest gatherings of people every year, and it's logistically one of the most amazing things that happens every year. And the Prophet Ibrahim made the announcement, and Allah said people will even come on foot or riding weak animals. So they will strive their best to get there somehow. And we've got to the point now where at first the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam would have said, who's going to hear me? We're now at the point where there are so many people that want to go that it can't possibly be accommodated. So, there are almost 3 million people, 2.5 million people that do Hajj a year. So maybe this year is a bit of a worry because of coronavirus. We don't know whether, it will operate in the same way. But just on the interesting point, if you don't mind me saying, about the people that will sort of walk on foot. You may have come across the story a couple of years back. This was the beginning of the Syrian war. There was a Bosnian Muslim who walked all the way from Bosnia straight to Saudi Arabia to perform the Hajj. And his story is documented on Facebook. It's really interesting if anyone wants to look it up. Because he mentioned that Allah came to him in a dream and told him, it's time, you've got to do the Hajj. And one of the most amazing things about reading that, it's just such a miracle hearing about it, was he'd said that he'd go to sleep and Allah would even tell him the path to take the following day to sort of weave around, the war in Syria and, what to do in certain areas. So it was amazing that he actually walked through a war zone as well with the guidance that Allah was giving him. So, so the Hajj is also one of the most diverse meetings of people every year. And if you think about the effect that people has on people doing the Hajj, if you're from somewhere like Pakistan, China, or Turkey, You know, it's not likely that you may not come across people of other ethnicities and other cultures in your lifetime. I suppose in London, it's a bit different for us because we live in such a diverse society. But that's not always the case. And if we look at the story of Malcolm X, for example, that's a brilliant case of where someone, someone who lived in a particular society where, diversity wasn't something that was welcomed. You know, it was either, some people in society were very different. He couldn't imagine that, people of different races would exist together before the Hajj. And what he preached was very different as well. So, it gave him an opportunity to change. And after that, he started promoting diversity. If you ever read some of the letters of one of his letters to his family, he talked about the fact that, he prayed next to people that are, white, blonde, blue-eyed, and, someone next to him being dark-skinned or Chinese. I'm paraphrasing because I can't quite remember the letter. But yeah, I just thought that was very interesting. And if you've never read the biography of Malcolm X, I do recommend that you should.
That is actually very moving. I read that, and maybe we can actually do a program about Muslim celebrities or people from different backgrounds who came to Islam, and we could actually, maybe you could look up and give us a whole. You could give us some more information about Malcolm X's life and his Hajj, which changed the course of his life, really, wasn't it? Going to Hajj changed the course of his life. If I could add something to what you just said, when the Prophet Ibrahim made the peace of and blessings of Allah be upon him and his noble family, the story where he goes on top of the Kaaba and he calls out to the wilderness for people to come on foot or by animal. I remember when I went to Hajj at a very young age, I think I was 21, and 2 days before the Hajj was to begin, we went to Arafat. We went to Muzdalifah and Arafat just to see what it looks like before millions of people convey onto this area. And I remember seeing Bedouins from Taif coming on camel. You don't see that anymore. It's a thing of the past. But I'm really, really happy that I actually saw that. And that was the ayah of the saying of the Prophet Ibrahim, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, that they will come by foot or by animal. And I was really pleased to see that, because now you go, it's like by taxi and cars and buses, but not so many camels anymore. So thanks for sharing that. Really enjoyed that. There's a couple of questions. It's our question and answer sessions, everyone. I have a few questions, and most of the questions are really based on the same thing. So Chanel Ali and also Akile Kortmaz has asked, can we give fitra to close family members, and does the same apply for zakat? Does anybody know? Because I know what the answers are, but maybe you guys know.
From my knowledge, you can give it to family members who are in need and who are in poverty. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hussein Oda.
Is this for fitra or zakat? Sorry, brother.
So this is for fitra, fitra. As well as actually both, actually. Well, I might be wrong, if you can correct me on that. Okay,
so according to the Hanafi madhab, we cannot give zakat to a close family member. And there's very, very good logic behind this, because as a Muslim community and as a family network, if my blood brother or my mother and father are having financial issues, then it's my obligation as their son and the brother to have to do this anyway to help them throughout the year. So the zakat is not given to any institution or any close family member. Second or third cousin, a distant aunt who's poor is not a problem. Fitra can be given again to distant relatives, but not to a close member of the family. You cannot give fitra. So I cannot give fitra to my son. I cannot give fitra to my grandson. I cannot give fitra to my mother, father, sister, nephews, and nieces. If I'm wrong, Allahu alim, but that's according to my knowledge from the Hanafi madhab. So there's another question on the same issue. And if you also miss salah, is it okay to do 2 prayers at once for the one you missed, or even you missed 3 in one day? Can you how do you make them up? So the question is around. So when we mentioned, I'm going to ask Yusuf to answer this question. So Yusuf, can you answer the question about qaza namaz?
Sure. Yeah, qaza or qada. Yeah, essentially, if you have missed the time slot to perform that salah, then you can make it up. The majority view is that you would try to keep it in order. So if you missed the last, let's say that, so the 5 prayers, you've got Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. Okay. Now, let's say that you missed the Asr prayer, and now it's time for the Maghrib prayer. Then you would first pray Asr, and then you would pray Maghrib. So you would try to keep it in order. Let's say that you missed 2 prayers beforehand. You would then do Dhuhr, then Asr, then Maghrib. And you would do that as much as 5 salahs beforehand. So you can still make up for it. However, it will not be the same as praying it in the actual time slot, because there's great wisdom behind praying your salah in those given and dedicated 5 time slots. And we're just talking, when we talk about the 5, we're talking about the compulsory, the mandatory. In addition, one can pray salah as many times as they want outside of that as well. And there are some recommended other slots that people can pray their salah. And finally, the last point I would make is that one shouldn't be too excessive in praying their salah, and that might sound counterintuitive. You know, salah is about worshipping God and connecting with God, as we mentioned. But that's not the only way in which we connect with God. And if one's not fulfilling their other obligations in life, if they're not interacting with their community, if they're not interacting with their family, if they're not doing other things that they should be doing, and they're just focusing on salah, then you have gone extreme in that sense. And the Prophet, upon whom be peace, stated that one should not go extreme, and that this is a religion of moderation. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it does. And another quick question on fasting, was okay. So Eltan, if you know the answer to this, if I'm asthmatic and I'm fasting and I have an asthma attack, can I use my pump while I'm fasting?
This is a great question, and actually, as I was preparing for my talk today, I came across this question. So it's great timing. Now, smoking, for example, is not allowed. Some people have tried to justify smoking in that it doesn't go to your stomach. But the majority of scholars have said that smoking is not allowed. Now, using this same logic, a minority of scholars have said that using an asthma pump is the same thing, because it's not going to your stomach, but it's still passing the throat. But given that asthma medication is something more recent scholars who are more up to date with modern technology and modern medicine, they are saying that if you have asthma, you are allowed to use your asthma pump. So a medical condition like asthma should not prevent you from fasting. If you have an asthma attack, God forbid, while you're fasting, you can still use your asthma pump. So please don't worry about that.
I think that's really beautifully put, because I think a lot of people get confused. It's like the thing, if you cut yourself and you bleed, then your fasting is broken. And people take that so literally that, they've fasted for 14 hours, 20 minutes before the break of fast, little cut on their finger. Oh, damn, I've lost my fast for the whole day, and they eat something when you could have actually continued fasting. Because I think the whole thing is just to safeguard our health. So if you've got lots of blood gushing from a wound, then you need to stop your fasting. But if it's just like a little splinter or a cut, you should continue your fasting. And thanks, Eltan.
Yeah.
I mean,
actually,
I think also.
Can I just interject? To be honest with you, the one about the cut fingers, first time I'm hearing that from you. But
Yeah.
you touched on a very important point that I should have mentioned in my talk, and that is that when you're fasting, sometimes you can forget that you're actually fasting. Sometimes without thinking, you might just get a glass of water and drink it, or you might put something in your mouth and start eating it. In those situations, you should continue fasting. And if you, for example, you put something in your mouth like an olive, for example, you're chewing on it. While you're chewing on it, you realize that you're fasting and you shouldn't be eating. You're not supposed to spit it out. You're supposed to continue eating it, finish what you've eaten, and then continue fasting as if it didn't happen. Because in the Quran and Hadith, we learn that when you forget in such a circumstance and you wind up eating or drinking something, that is actually a provision that Allah has written for you, and you should not reject it. You should not spit it out. So finish what you're doing and then continue fasting as if it didn't happen.
And thanks for making that clear, because that's a very important thing. And Shana Ali is asking, can you taste food while cooking? I know a lot of our grandmothers used to do this, but I think the answer would be no.
Yeah, probably no.
Unless you are a cook. I've heard in some Islamic traditions, if you was a cook and you were cooking for like a specific number of people and you were fasting, you had to taste the food. There is this kind of tradition that I read actually somewhere. So if you was working like in a palace or feeding the people who are coming to break their fast, and the cook did have a sip, then they were given some privileges. But I don't know how true that is.
Can I ask?
Okay.
There is also a difference of opinion on this topic, actually, because across the different schools of thought, one view is also that what breaks one fast in terms of food and drink is if you're putting it into your mouth for the purposes of nutritional benefit. So that's why, the majority view is that you can brush your teeth. You're actually putting toothpaste in your mouth, but you're not doing that with the purpose of getting nutritional benefit. And you can put water in your mouth and rinse your mouth with water and spit it out. How would you do your wudu? How would you do your abdest? Your ablution. So there is a view that you can actually put taste food in your mouth, but you would have to spit it out. And again, it comes down to intentions, and there is a difference of opinion on that.
Thank you, Yusuf. A question for brother Mustafa, who kindly went over the Shahada. A word is quite used a lot, saying shirk, that if you take partners with God, and it can be over some very small things like having an object in your house. How do people, what's your advice? And I mean, what is the logic about taking partners with God?
Okay. So the Shahada is affirming that there is only one God. So when you say La ilaha illallah, what is Allah? And we really need to understand this. Briefly, Allah is one. He doesn't have a son or daughter or father or mother. That's the pure monotheism there. But the word shirk, which a major shirk would be associating partners with Allah in a very obvious way. So saying that there is more than one God, that would be a major shirk, and that is something unforgivable for a Muslim. It's a unforgivable offense. But there are minor shirk as well. So, for example, you could take, if you're really obsessed with football, for example, and that becomes your religion in the sense that you're completely obsessed. You've gone to an extreme. You forgot Allah and all the blessings that He's given to you. Then that could be a small shirk, but it's not to be confused with a major shirk in terms of its severity, in terms of its offense. So shirk essentially is associating partners with Allah, be it directly in having more than one God, believing in more than one God, or in being obsessive about other things in your life, which makes you forget about God in a sense as well. Regarding this, like statues and things as well, and idols in the home, if your intention is to worship the idol, then yeah, absolutely, that is shirk. I mean, it's not. You can argue for the case that it's not something that's really recommended Islamically, but I wouldn't class it as something as harsh as shirk. And I hope that answers the question.
No, that's beautifully put, and that's really yeah, that's good. Actually, that was good for me to hear as well, because that's a question people ask me a lot. So I will answer them in that way. Another question would be on the Hajj. Sorry, Alimullah, can you also explain the difference between Hajj and Umrah? Because people get a little bit confused in the Turkish Cypriot community. If you've been to Umrah, they come back and they start calling you a Hajji. I think you've become a Hajji. So can you explain what the difference is?
Okay, I'll try. I think the Umrah is something that can be done at any time. And it doesn't have all the rituals that the Hajj would have. The Hajj itself is done at a particular day, at a particular time of the year. And then it has some rituals that the Umrah doesn't have, as far as I know.
That's correct.
In short, that's the answer really. It has to be done at a particular time, and to be deemed as Hajj.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the person who asked this question, so the Umrah, the difference between Umrah and Hajj is that when you go on the Hajj, it's the complete pilgrimage in the footsteps of our forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam. Abraham, may the peace and blessings of God be upon him, and the actions taken with the sacrifice, going to the Mount of Mercy, there's going and staying in the desert for 3 days, stoning the pillars of Satan. So these are there's lots of different kind of things you do in Hajj that you don't do in Umrah. Umrah is just going to Mecca and to Medina if you have the time, and going worshipping around the Kaaba, and just doing the sa'i, which is 7 times between the 2 hills, but there's not actually visible hills. It's an enclosed building where you walk 7 times, reenacting the footsteps of our mother Hajar alayhi salam, looking for water for her son Ismail alayhi salam, who was the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so that's the only thing in Umrah. So going outside of Umrah to the Mount of Mercy, Nurda, or go to Arafah, to go to Muzdalifah is just voluntary. I'm sure there's a reward for it, but it's not not an act of worship within the Umrah. So that's the difference between Umrah and Hajj. And Ali is very correct by saying it's only at certain times. It's opened at the same. It's not open at the moment due to COVID-19, and it usually closes within the year, 2 months before the Hajj begins. Can people on medication, can they fast? Edvan?
Depends what type of medication, obviously, and what type of illness. But the general rule is if you are not healthy enough to fast, you should not fast. In fact, it goes as far as it becoming haram for you to fast if you are going to harm yourself. If your doctor is telling you that you need to take a certain medication at certain times, and those times coincide with the times of fasting, then you should listen to your doctor and you should not fast. But if you can delay taking your medication till after Maghrib, after the sun sets, when you're allowed to eat and drink as normal, if you can do that, then you can and you should still fast. But if it's coinciding with the fasting times, then you shouldn't fast.
Very, very beautifully put. And that's something really, really important, brothers and sisters, that if you do have a medical condition, you are exempt from fasting. I mean, Allah says in the Quran that He made this religion easy for us. He doesn't want to put us under any burdens. I mean, the faith is to be easy. It's us that makes the faith hard. It's us that impose these kind of manly rules upon the religion. If you're not feeling well, and Allah is very, very merciful, fasting is not for you. If you're taking medication throughout the day, if you're taking insulin, if you're on a dialysis machine, you should not be fasting, brothers and sisters. If you still want to contribute in the fast, you can give fidya, which is calculated about a meal a day. So if you like 5 or 6 pounds, put that aside before the end of Ramadan. Give that to a poor family, maybe someone somewhere. It can be in the UK, it can be abroad. Someone who's fasting, someone who's poor, to buy food for their family and you will be compensated, and you will have the rewards of fasting 30 days. Brothers and sisters, as you know, we're in a period of COVID-19, and every Thursday night the country comes together to congratulate its key workers, the staff, the NHS, our doctors, nurses, police, ambulances, and also those who work for funeral services. Thank you very much. And so don't forget, 8 o'clock, if you want to clap for us or just salute to us or salute to all our key workers, please do so. Before we close up, within a minute, any message for the community this week, starting from Ertan?
Okay, it's not really so much of a message, just one thing I wanted to remind people about when it comes to fasting. I want to give an example from the Prophet Muhammad. One day, it was Ramadan, he was fasting, and out of nowhere, he got some water and he drank the water. He broke his fast in the middle of the day, and his companions were confused. Some of them, they followed suit, they also drank water, and some of them were like, what the hell's going on? And the Prophet Muhammad said that those who do not break their fasts with me are the rebellious ones. And that's because that particular day, he didn't have any health conditions or anything. Everything was fine. But that particular day was scorching hot. And it got to the point where if, people were going to die of dehydration if they didn't break their fast. Now, this is a very extreme example. It happened one time in the Prophet's life, as far as we know. Keep in mind, he lived in the desert in Arabia, so it's always hot there anyway. But this particular day would have been so hot that it would have killed people. So our religion is a religion of mercy. It's a religion of ease. We should not be harming ourselves. We should not be harming ourselves through fasting. But if all the conditions are right, you have no excuse not to fast. You should still do your best to fast anyway.
That was really beautiful to hear. And yes, if you've been to Saudi Arabia, brothers and sisters, and I've been in that, like the most mild of months, it's very, very extremely hot. God knows what it's like in the middle of the summer. But again, it reminds us how merciful the beloved the Prophet of Allah is, and how merciful Allah is to us. And when it reminds us of also the saying in the Quran where Allah says that I sent you only as a mercy to mankind. Any message to the community very quickly from Ahmed Barud?
Just to remind everybody to in Ramadan, a very important time to religion, learn about your religion, about the 5 pillars, learn about the Quran, read the translation, one of the translations, read some commentary on the Quran as well. Also, try your best to read the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's a very inspiring story, and so many lessons from that as well.
Thank you, Ahmed. And Alimullah?
I think I would just like to add that the Muslims during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, as soon as the month of Ramadan would finish, they would say that they would start preparing for the next Ramadan. Yeah. So Ramadan was so important to them that it was something that they would prepare a whole year ahead. So yeah, it's, we're in the month now. We're very lucky to be there, and it's a great opportunity for us to make the best time of it. As Ahmed said, maybe reading Quran or the Seerah and things like that. So that's it. That's my message.
Thank you. And yes, brother Mustafa Qureshi from Jazeera Devney, last message to the community. And we hope to see you next week as well.
Yeah, inshallah. My message is simply, many people, they get worried that they may be sinners and they can't start practicing, or they touch the Quran, and that's simply not true. That's whispers from the shaitan, we believe. Yeah, Allah is most merciful, most compassionate. So if you believe in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger, and you're trying to be a good Muslim, then Allah tells us that every Muslim will eventually enter the paradise. So just try your best, guys.
Okay, that's very beautiful. That gives us, in the month of Ramadan, to hear these kind of words from people from our own community. It's really, really nice. It's 8 o'clock. Even if we're not clapping, we do salute all those who have saved lives in this country. It's really important. Our NHS staff, we lost lots of people who worked for the NHS, who worked for the national transport. Lots of them died. lots for the Muslim community, whatever community they are. May the mercy of Allah be upon all those who have been affected by the coronavirus. It's brought one thing together. It's brought us together. It's made us remember that we're all human at the end of the day. Thanks for whoever joined to listen to Ramadan Reflections program number 2. We shall be here next week with our guests again. We're looking at different topics. Stay tuned. Stay blessed. Ramadan Mubarak to everybody. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. And we're now going off live.
Assalamu alaikum.